Welcome to another production of the Sweetwater County Historical Museum. Today, we will be talking about primary and secondary sources when doing historical research. When we research history, we can look at lots of different places to learn. Maybe we watch a video online, perhaps we read a book. But different sources can tell us different things. Do you think you learn the same kind of information from a video or when you visit a museum? Are there any other places we can learn about history that I haven't mentioned here? A source is anywhere you get your information from. This could be a newspaper, a video, or even your teacher. And it's always very important to cite your sources. That is, you should say where you got your information from. If you wanted to learn more about cowboys in the 19th century, which do you think might be more helpful? A picture of a cowboy? A book written by a cowboy? Or a book about cowboys? Well, the truth is, it kind of depends. A primary source is a source that was created by and during the time you are curious about. For example, a picture, a document, an artifact, or other written or tangible item created during the period. If you had a picture of some kids in front of a school, for example, that might be a primary source. This picture might be an example of a primary source. It is an old picture, so if this is the time we're trying to learn about, it might tell us some things. It was created by and during the period we are trying to learn about. A secondary source is a source about the time frame you are interested in. They are usually written many years after the event happened. A secondary source might be a book or an article about the past. Secondary sources often mention or use primary sources, such as a book using pictures or quoting older books. Museum exhibits are often secondary sources. Secondary sources are going to include some change from the person making the source. An article about the 1950s is only going to include the things that that person finds important or wants to talk about. It might also include the author's opinion on something, and not the opinion of the person doing the action. But they are also likely to tell you more things. The book Sweetwater Women is an example of a secondary source. The author is looking at other primary sources, but includes the lives of many different women and many different experiences. Reading multiple versions of these stories might help you learn more about these women's lives. Starting with a book like this is also a good place to start to find out more about these women. Let's see how you do. Let's take a look at those cowboy examples from earlier, and let's see if you can tell which one is a primary or a secondary source. This is a book by Bill Carlisle. He was an outlaw and a cowboy in the 19th century. This book is an autobiography, meaning he wrote it about his own life. Do you think this is a primary or a secondary source? Why? This is a primary source because it is coming from him and was written about his own life. How about this picture from earlier? Is this a primary or a secondary source? Why do you think that is? This is a primary source because it is a picture of people in the era. It was taken by and during that time frame. How about this one? This book is called I See by Your Outfit by Tom Lindmeyer and Steve Mount. It is about cowboys and the clothes they wore. Do you think this is a primary or a secondary source? Why? This book is a secondary source. Neither Tom Lindmeyer nor Steve Mount lived in the time of the cowboys they are talking about. They never wore these outfits, They are not in any of these pictures. However, they are using primary sources, pictures, to learn more about the past. Reading a book like this one might be a good place to start learning more about what kind of outfits cowboys wore. Different sources help us learn different things. Secondary sources are usually a pretty good place to start, but primary sources usually tell us more. A book can be harder to find, but usually tells us a lot more than a website. Good research involves looking at all sorts of different kinds of sources. What others wrote about your topic, what books have been written, and seeing if you can find pictures or other sources about your topic. For instance, what if you wanted to do research on the museum's building, which was built in the 1930s as a post office? You could look at old photos of the building. You could look at articles written about the history of the building, or even visit the museum itself. But you could even use the building itself. You could look at the building today and see what you could learn about how it was built. The internet can help you find both primary sources like pictures and secondary sources like books or articles. However, using different sources and not just the internet can help you learn a lot more. Different sources help us learn different things. Secondary sources are usually a pretty good place to start, but primary sources usually tell us more. A book can be harder to find, but usually tells us a lot more than a website. Good research involves looking at all sorts of different kinds of sources. What others wrote about your topic, what books have been written, and seeing if you can find pictures or other sources about your topic. For instance, what if you wanted to do research on the museum's building, which was built in the 1930s as a post office? You could look at old photos of the building. You could look at articles written about the history of the building, or even visit the museum itself. But you could even use the building itself. You could look at the building today and see what you could learn about how it was built. The internet can help you find both primary sources like pictures and secondary sources like books or articles. However, using different sources and not just the internet can help you learn a lot more. Different sources help us learn different things. Secondary sources are usually a pretty good place to start, but primary sources usually tell us more. A book can be harder to find, but usually tells us a lot more than a website. Good research involves looking at all sorts of different kinds of sources. What others wrote about your topic, what books have been written, and seeing if you can find pictures or other sources about your topic. For instance, what if you wanted to do research on the museum's building, which was built in the 1930s as a post office? You could look at old photos of the building. You could look at articles written about the history of the building, or even visit the museum itself. But you could even use the building itself. You could look at the building today and see what you could learn about how it was built. The internet can help you find both primary sources like pictures and secondary sources like books or articles. However, using different sources and not just the internet can help you learn a lot more. Let's take a look at some examples and see if we can figure out what makes a good source. All of these examples are made up. Which of these do you think is a good source about cowboys? A Facebook post from a friend about cowboys? A picture of a cowboy? A Hollywood movie about cowboys? A museum exhibit about cowboys and the range wars? A website called I Think Cowboys Are Cool? A doctor from 1868? Or an article on the Smithsonian's website about cowboy outlaws? A Facebook post from a friend about cowboys, a Hollywood movie about cowboys, and a website called I Think Cowboys Are Cool are all probably not great sources. They're not usually going to come from experts, and they're usually going to be from somebody who thinks cowboys are cool and maybe found a source or two, but is probably not great research. A picture of a cowboy, a museum exhibit about cowboys and the range wars, a doctor from the 1880s, and an article from the Smithsonian's website are all pretty good. A picture of a cowboy, assuming it's from the era you're looking at and not necessarily just a picture of a cowboy from a set for a movie, would be a good one. If it's a picture from a movie, then it's probably not a good one. A museum exhibit about cowboys and the range wars is a good one if you think that the museum is good at their research. And hopefully if they're a museum, they have a person whose job it is to research cool things like cowboys. A Doctor from 1888 is a good source in this case if he's talking about, say, cowboys and cowboys' health. If he is talking about cool tools for medical research in the 1880s, it's probably not very useful because he's not talking about cowboys. An article from the Smithsonian's website about cowboy outlaws is probably a pretty good source. It's on the internet, but just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's a bad source. The Smithsonian is a really big museum in Washington, D.C. How many of these did you think you got right? Did you get any of them wrong? Do you disagree with any of these sources? Or are there other sources you think that should have been listed here too? Using a mixture of good primary and secondary sources will help your research get better and stronger. If you're ever confused, make sure to ask your teacher or another adult for help. You can see all sorts of great research resources and other ways to learn more about history at the Sweetwater County Historical Museum in Green River, Wyoming. Thanks for watching, and remember to keep on learning and paying attention in class, and we'll see you folks next time.